Hello, Definers! Welcome to a special bonus episode of Sustainability Defined, where Jay Siegel and I are defining sustainability one concept and one bad joke at a time. Jay is under the weather today as we're recording, so you just got me for the intro, but don't worry. Jay's lovely voice will be with you with the interview. So this bonus episode, it's the first in a pair of episodes we're doing in partnership with the Zayed Sustainability Prize. The Zayed Sustainability Prize, or the Prize for short, is the UAE's pioneering global award in sustainability and was established in 2008. It's an award that recognizes and rewards organizations and high schools who are driving impactful, innovative, and inspiring sustainability solutions across 5 distinct categories: health, food, energy, water, and global high schools. In this bonus episode, you're going to hear from David Sandalow, one of the prize's selection committee members within their energy category. David is the Inaugural Fellow at the Center on Global Energy Policy and co-director of the Energy and Environment Concentration at the Center on Global Energy Policy and co-director of the Energy and Environment Concentration at the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. He's also a former senior official at the White House State Department and the U.S. Department of Energy. He's going to talk to us about his extensive background and experience and why he's involved with the prize. In our next episode, we're going to dive into water and agriculture. It's going to have the format of our usual episodes, and that episode will feature an interview with the founder of a previous prize winner, Sears Imaging, and we're going to publish that episode on Friday, January 6th, in line with our normal first Friday of the month schedule. So we hope everybody enjoyed the traditional holiday hodgepodge episode we released earlier this month. We want to wish all our definers a wonderful holiday season.
All right, Definers, welcome to the interview portion with this special bonus episode in connection with the Zayed Sustainability Prize. We have the great fortune to be connecting today with David Sandalow, the Energy Selection Committee member at the Zayed Sustainability Prize. And not just that, he is also the Inaugural Fellow at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University, a former senior official at the White House State Department and U.S. Department of Energy, and of course, above all else, a proud grandfather, but quite a list of titles there, David. We are honored to be able to connect with you, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Jay, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here. And yes, that last title of grandfather is the most important.
And David, you did forewarn us that you might have some grandkids running in during the recording, screaming something. And secretly, I'm kind of hoping for that. So fingers crossed.
There was a very robust selection committee for the proud grandfather as well.
So, David, we're very excited to talk with you. And to start things off, let's just talk about your current role and background before we move into the specifics of your role with the Zayed Sustainability Prize. So, as we mentioned, you're the Inaugural Fellow at the Center on Global Energy Policy, as well as the co-director of the Energy and Environment Concentration at the School of International Public Affairs at Columbia. So, in your own words, could you just describe to us what you tend to focus on in these impressive positions?
Delighted, Jay. So at the Center on Global Energy Policy, my focus is research writing and convening of meetings. And there, although I've covered a number of topics, the biggest single focus is China's climate and energy policies and relations between the U.S. and China, which are pretty challenging at this point. But I've just released a book, A Guide to Chinese Climate Policy, which was published by Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. We have 26 chapters, 250 pages, 1,100 footnotes. The goal is to provide authoritative, reliable information about what's happening in climate change policy in China. And as some of your listeners may know, last year China had more greenhouse gas emissions than the US, Europe, and Japan combined. So there is no solution to climate change without China.
And David, I'm wondering with that whole book, are there a couple insights or takeaways, and it's probably really hard to distill it down, but just for our listeners, I'm sure are very interested for the reason you just said, and in Chinese climate policy, that you would want listeners to know that maybe they don't know about Chinese climate policy?
Great question. So a few things. So first, the Chinese government has very ambitious long-term climate change goal, which is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. And that was announced in a very high-profile setting by President Xi Jinping at the United Nations a couple of years ago. And it implies a dramatic transformation in the Chinese economy in the next 3.5 decades, a little bit more.
Yeah.
The short-term policies are more complicated. I've described them as a study in contrasts. On the one hand, China's led the world in renewable power deployment for many years, and almost half the electric vehicles in the world today are in China. And nuclear power, which is more controversial, but which does produce almost zero greenhouse gases, is growing fast in China, and China's center of the nuclear power industry and the growth of nuclear power today. However, notwithstanding what I just said, the Chinese government continues to approve the construction of enormous numbers of coal plants and enormous coal-fired power plant capacity, which undercuts progress in the other areas. So it's a complicated story. The book, by the way, it's available on Amazon if you want a hard copy, and it's also available for free download on our website. Oh. So if you just Google Guide to China's Climate Policy 2022, you can get a free download.
Nice.
That is fantastic. And David, continuing on the conversation within the context of the prize, we're curious. I mean, clearly you had advanced to some pretty remarkable positions, putting together some remarkable work. We're curious, what led you to dedicate your career to sustainability? Was it perhaps an interest you had early on, or was it something that you gravitated to naturally over time?
It's an interesting question. It dates back, I think, to a young age, to my love of the outdoors. As a teenager, I loved just the long hiking trips and long canoe trips I took in summer camp. And then that turned into, adventure traveling in my 20s. And it just always was fascinated by the core question of how do we protect nature. And that led me to do work as an environmental lawyer for a while. I'm a lawyer by training, although I haven't practiced law for more than a quarter century now. And then in the 90s, I had an extraordinary opportunity to work at the White House for President Bill Clinton and Vice President Al Gore. And when I was there, the main topic I was covering was climate change. Covered a range of topics, but worked on climate change for them. And Al Gore had written a remarkable book on this topic before he went into the administration, before he became vice president. And I just had the opportunity to work on the climate change issue at the highest levels of government, which was an incredible honor and incredible thrill. And since that time, I've devoted much of my career to issues related to energy policy, climate policy, and environmental policy.
Well, it's funny you say that you started with your interest, was it from summer camp? That's often where I go too when people ask me this question, that the wilderness trips I did at Camp Timberlane in Monaco, Wisconsin, led me, I think, to where I am now. And then I'm also a lawyer by training, but I haven't practiced in a while. So got some commonalities there. But
well, Scott, we've got a lot to catch up on and talk about, because mine was in Michigan, so across the lake, and some of my early experience was in Porcupine Mountains, right north of where you were in Wisconsin. So it's absolutely beautiful country.
The Porkies, as we called it, was the 3-day backpacking trip that one had to take the longer trips, like to Iowa Royale.
Very interesting.
Oh, yes. We'll have to talk, David. So, but what we don't have in common is I was not in Egypt for COP27. I know we want to ask you about that. Could you share some of your takeaways or interesting stories from that experience?
Well, yes. And just to date myself, and I guess I've already done this, this was COP27, meaning the 27th annual conference of the parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. When I was at the White House, I was a member of the delegation to COP1, which was in 1995, and it was held in Berlin, Germany. And every year, the host government chairs these meetings, and at COP1, the chair of the meeting was a really incredibly capable young environment minister named Angela Merkel.
Wow,
I didn't know that.
Who did a great job, and so I've been going to these meetings for a long time. And my view of these COPs is they're actually incredibly important. And one reason, in my view, they're important is because they are an action-forcing event that makes heads of state and makes heads of companies and makes the media pay attention to climate change. and as an issue every year. And one of the challenges of climate change, it's a political issue, is that it's caused by invisible odorless gases, and the impacts are sometimes hard to see in people's ordinary lives.
Sure.
And that's different than a lot of political issues. And so you need these action forcing events, I think, that compel, people to pay attention. I mean, one of my takeaways from being in the White House as a staff person was the remarkable breadth of issues the president needs to pay attention to. I mean, obviously climate change is a existential issue, but the president also has to pay attention to, war and peace and the economy and civil rights and social security and, a long list of other issues that are really important. And that's true for heads of state all over the world. And so I think these COPs are just incredibly important from that standpoint. At the same time, they can be very frustrating because 190 countries need to come together and agree. And those countries have often wildly different interests. And so almost by their nature, these COPs produce incremental progress. It can just be excruciatingly slow to watch progress at these COPs. And I would say COP27 in some respects exceeded my low expectations for the meeting. I was worried that there might be a breakdown on the issue of loss and damages, which many of your listeners, I'm guessing, will be familiar with, but it's a question of providing funding from the developed countries to the developing world to help compensate for the loss and damage they suffer from climate change. And that breakdown didn't happen. There was at least a small step forward towards establishing a fund in that area. And then there were a number of other important steps forward. I think there was some good progress on methane emissions, which is an important issue. Some interesting focus on the financing of climate change mitigation, in particular, a focus on the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. So I think there were some small steps forward at the meeting, which is, I think, what one can expect. And I think these meetings are very useful for the reason I said.
No, I mean, it's tough because it's a consensus-based approach, right? And I know I listened to one podcast talking about it where you had Russia and Ukraine there, right? So they're fighting on the battlefield, but they have to be part of the many countries agreeing to whatever it is we're going to agree to, as well as Saudi Arabia and countries that are dependent on fossil fuels, at least for now. So I can understand why it'd be slow and frustrating, but to your point, it is a forcing event, and not only is it a forcing event to come together and agree on these tougher issues, but it's also a forcing event to, well, what have you done for me lately? And what's your new initiative? So it gets people, they know they need new announcements and show progress. So I think it also has that benefit. I did want to ask, since you said you were at COP1, I'm just curious. Do the people that went to COP1, do you all get together on the side for like a fun little happy hour, a little reunion of the COP1 attendees, or is that not a thing?
Funny you ask. That has not happened, but a few people I know who were at COP1 have talked about trying to pull that together. So maybe prompted by your question, people try to do that.
I mean, you could certainly all meet at COP, but you could also meet at a certain idyllic location in Michigan and go on a backpacking trip together.
That would be lovely.
Well, David, I think it's safe to say we could keep talking with you about your areas of focus, probably indefinitely, but we do want to transition and start focusing on the prize, which is what convenes us here today. So as we introduce you, we let folks know that you're a member of the Zayed Sustainability Prize's Energy Selection Committee. So just basic, could you describe to us what exactly that position entails?
It's been a wonderful process and just such an exciting process. It's so exciting to see the way that the prize has empowered leaders around the world. And your question is, what does being on the selection committee entail? What that involves is we get briefs from the staff and others who prepare this, and then our committee meets and looks at the different candidates and decides who are we think the most compelling for selection as the prize winners. And it's never easy because almost everybody that gets to us is really extraordinary, but we make selection based upon a variety of criteria.
Fantastic. And David, remind us how long you've been involved with the prize, and then we're curious how you first discovered it in the first place.
I believe I first joined the selection committee around 2014, 2015. I served in the first term of the Obama administration until around 2013, and then left and a year or two after that was asked to join the prize committee. But I was aware of it previously. I have known for many years Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, who is a leader on these issues within the United Arab Emirates. We worked very closely together when I was in government in the Obama administration and before that. So I was aware of the prize before that, and joined the selection committee after I left government on my most recent tour.
All right, so David, you've been involved since 2014, 2015 or so. The prize was established in 2008, so 2023 marks 15 years of the prize. How do you expect it to build on its momentum in the next 15 years? I know you said that it went from energy to sustainability generally, and then, so how does it keep expanding its influence?
First, I hope the prize keeps doing what it's been doing, because I think it's now broadened and covers a number of different topics and supports visionary entrepreneurs, including social entrepreneurs across a variety of different categories. And that's really what I hope for it. I think prize leadership can consider broadening to some other areas. But I think one key piece for the years ahead would be developing networks of former prize winners, because there's now a body of extraordinary leaders who have received the prize. And I think they can learn from each other. And in addition to the cash benefits that a prize winner gets, being able to tap into a network of these extraordinary individuals, organizations who've won the prize in the past could be very helpful.
So I love this idea of bringing the previous winners together, having them help each other, connect with each other. And speaking of previous winners, David, I'd love it if maybe you could tell us about one story of someone who won the prize and then went on to have a big impact in the field of sustainability. Is that a story you can share with us?
A couple of winners come to mind right off the top of my head. One that I think is just great is an organization called Electricians Without Borders, which won, I think, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And obviously modeled in its name and in other ways after Doctors Without Borders, longstanding NGO. But Electricians Without Borders is particularly focused on getting distributed solar panels to refugee camps and other places as well, but particularly refugee camps. And I understand that both the financial support and the recognition they received from the prize has really contributed to their impact in a number of places around the world. And then also extraordinary Chinese leader on these issues, Li Zhongfeng, won the prize a number of years ago as an individual winner, and I think that's helped to empower him and his ideas in ways that are really important for the world. So, those are just two examples come to mind. There's lots of them, and I'd encourage people to go to the Zayed Prize website and just see the really remarkable organizations and individuals that have been honored with this prize.
So what are some of you talk about the thought leadership of, who was the person you mentioned?
Li Zhongfeng.
Li Zhongfeng. What are some of his ideas or thoughts?
Li Zhongfeng has been a leader on renewable energy in China for many years, and helped to draft some of the initial renewable power laws in China years ago. And then has been a really powerful voice for promoting renewable energy in China. And as I said earlier, China's led the world in renewable power for many, many years. And I think a lot of Zhongfeng's ideas have been adopted in ways that have been very beneficial.
Got it.
Fantastic. So, David, there's clearly phenomenal stories of impact coming from the prize, which could be the answer to the question I'm about to ask you, but perhaps there's more to it. Given your very impressive background spanning all different types of organizations and focus areas, we know you could be dedicating your time outside of Columbia to any number of things. So what would you say it is that keeps you involved here with the prize?
Oh, it's the potential for impact and recognition of these extraordinary organizations, and just the opportunity to contribute to that process.
Makes sense.
Fantastic.
All right, so David, let's pretend we've got all the COP1 people and their families maybe, because the COP1 people might know the party fact you're going to throw out here, but just general person at this shindig, we want to impress them with some party fact based on maybe some of your previous research or something about the prize, whatever you want. What's a party fact we can throw out to impress people?
Well, one attention-grabbing fact I've already mentioned, which is that last year that greenhouse gas emissions from China were more than those from the US, Europe, and Japan combined. But here's another in a totally different field that we've only briefly mentioned. It's that about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions globally come from the food system. And that's from everything from the manufacturing of fertilizer to what happens on the farm, to shipping of food, to processing of food, refrigeration of food, cooking of food, disposal of food. And when I first heard that fact, I thought that's astounding because the food system just doesn't get enough attention in the dialogue on climate change, given that fact. And I continue to believe that's true. So I think we started to see more attention to the food system in the relation to climate change at COP27. I think this is a very important area going forward.
Yeah, and I think between the water and agriculture episode we are going to do, the agroecology episode we did, the food waste episode we did, I think, the footprint of food is stunning, but I think maybe the most heartbreaking thing is how much of that footprint we are creating to make food that then we don't use. It's just like, really Absolutely. Tough to swallow.
Literally. All right. Well, David, we want to thank you very much again for setting some time aside to speak with us. We've loved just tapping into just a piece of your expertise, and we are certain that the prize is so much stronger for having you a part of it. So thanks again. We're excited to keep track of the prize and of yourself moving forward. Thanks again.
Jay and Scott, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
And Definers, if you would like to learn more on the Zayed Sustainability Prize, you can follow them on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Zayed Sustainability Prize. That's Zayed Sustainability Prize. The winners of the 2023 Zayed Sustainability Prize will be announced on January 16th, 2023 at the awards ceremony in Abu Dhabi.